Hi, everyone. It's awesome to see so many entrepreneurs here. Really, really cool. How many people have already started their own company? Awesome, great to see. How many are on the fence thinking about starting their own company within the next 6 months? Awesome. So my name is Linsey, and I run engineering at Homejoy. And if you haven't heard of us, Homejoy is the easiest way in the world to get your place cleaned. You book online, it's super easy, it takes like a minute, and we match you with one of the many independent cleaning professionals that we have vetted to put on our platform. And if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be working at a cleaning company, I would be like really surprised. So my personal background is mostly in artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've done that at Stanford and a bunch of other places. Most recently, I co-founded a startup called Crowdbooster, which is an automated social media analytics platform that gives you recommendations on how to tweet better. And oddly enough, this turned out to be great, preparation for doing a cleaning startup. And we're seeing this trend with more and more technology companies where software is attacking what was once thought of as a very traditional brick-and-mortar business. So stuff like cleaning, taxis, groceries, mechanics, delivery, et cetera. And the funny thing, if you look into all of these companies, a lot of them, first off, are doing super well. And if you look at the founders' backgrounds, pretty much none of them actually worked in the industry that they chose to start a company in. Most of their background is exactly like the background of everyone here in this room. They're technology entrepreneurs. And this is actually kind of surprising to me. It's surprising that, it's not surprising that software is changing these industries, but it's surprising that it is apparently easier for Silicon Valley technology companies to learn how to move into these industries than it is for these industries to adapt to the world of software. And Mark Andreessen coined a quote called "Software is eating the world." And more broadly, I think this can be rephrased as technology companies in particular are eating the world. And I think this is very exciting. Over the past few months, there's been a lot of anxiety in the Valley. People are talking about maybe there's too many startups. We have the Series A crunch. Apparently, Twitter stock is down or something. I don't really check it. But if you look at all the different industries that all of these companies have moved into, I think there are actually far too few startups. Because the game with technology companies is no longer competing for the same attention buckets when a user is wasting time online. You're no longer all competing around the same IT budgets at major companies. The playing field is now the entire services sector of the economy. And that is huge. That is enormous. And we have not come close to tapping all the potential for new technology companies in this space. So that's obviously fantastic news for everyone in this room. But it probably leaves you a lot of questions. I've talked with many first-time entrepreneurs, particularly young entrepreneurs, who really don't know how to go about starting a company that is eating a very traditional industry. Their background is primarily just in programming or in product design, and they don't really know where to get started. So that's what I thought I'd talk about today, how to eat the world. Like, what is the playbook for entering a market that you're otherwise totally unfamiliar with and creating a successful startup in? So it's actually relatively straightforward. And as an engineer, it reminds me a lot of Don Knuth's adage that premature optimization is the root of all evil, in that it's hard to know exactly how to scale a eat the world startup ahead of time. Rather, you just have to try it. And if you want to start a business in an industry which you know nothing about, the best way is to honestly just get going and start and see what problems you run into later. And I'll share a lot of stories about Homejoy that kind of elucidate this point later on. So the first step, if you want to build a company like this, is choosing exactly what market you want to compete in. And it is an extremely common mistake I see first-time entrepreneurs make, to shy away from really hard problems. Especially when I describe a company like Homejoy, we have to vet thousands of different cleaning professionals. We have to ensure that they get to jobs on time, that they are thorough, and that we are able to scale quality across 30 cities across 2 continents now. And how do you do that? That sounds quite difficult. And I encourage you to not endorse this kind of thinking. Startups in general are hard. And if you optimize for what is easy in the first 3 months, you're bound to run into more headwinds later. In general, independent of Eat the World startups or any other kind of startup, if you have 2 ideas that you're considering for a company, one of them you're not sure there's a big market for, but it sounds like you can get a prototype out the door really easily and build the business really easily. And the other one, you're sure there's a big opportunity, but you just don't know how to go about it. It sounds like there's a lot of hard problems. I encourage you to choose the latter. because if you have a really good team focused on solving those problems, you can overcome them. So in particular, common objections to Eat the World startups are, they're very low margins. You're not going to see Google or Microsoft style profit margins in services. It's hard to evaluate, suppliers. It's hard to maintain quality among those suppliers. But really, these are all problems that technology can help solve. By making intelligent use of data and data mining and building more efficient tools, you can overcome all of these. And you can overcome them, I think, more easily than a traditional brick-and-mortar business can move into software, which means you'll have an advantage. All right, so you've chosen a market, and now you just need to know how to get started. How do you learn about cleaning to begin with? Well, I think you should learn by doing. So this picture is Dan, a senior engineer on the team. He's doing an excellent job sweeping up the floors under that rug right now. And this is still actually a big part of Homejoy's culture. Everyone in the company has to clean, and has to clean somewhat regularly. So if you don't want to scrub toilets, Homejoy might not be the best fit for you. And we do this because it's very important for everyone from engineering to operations to client services to have a good handle on exactly what we're doing as a business. And more broadly, when you're just starting out and you don't know how a certain industry operates, I encourage you to work in that industry. So Adora, our co-founder and CEO, when she decided to build a cleaning business, the first thing she did is actually work as a maid for several weeks for a large national cleaning company. And because she has a computer science background, she was able to identify all sorts of different things which they were doing, which she knew could be automated by software. And as a result, we've been able to build a large suite of internal tools and build a product where we effectively charge our customers less, we pay our cleaners more, and we still have a business model that functions well because we understand that business deeply. And that would have never happened if Adora hadn't actually worked as a cleaner. And it would have never happened, and we wouldn't keep that advantage if we didn't keep everyone in the company very close to the industry they're working on. So I encourage you, as step one, to actually work in the industry that you want to try and take over. All right, so now that you've learned a little bit about the industry you're going into, what do you decide what to build? How much do you need to build before going to market, and how do you scale the business? And I think you should not plan this too far ahead of time. I think you should just launch with very little technology, see what happens, see what breaks, and rinse and repeat. It's really, if you're an engineer, it's not that dissimilar to how you scale an actual software system. So it's hard to know in advance exactly what part of your code will break before you've written it. The rate limiting step might be somewhere you don't expect. So you start, you see what happens, and you go from there. So one of Homejoy's key pieces of technology is actually our phone system. We've built now a very robust phone system that connects to our backend database, and this is able to do stuff like intelligent routing of calls so that cleaners can call their clients without revealing their caller ID, et cetera. But we didn't launch with that technology. We launched with this right here as our phone system. And it works. And in general, I think if you're thinking about building a company and you don't know when to launch, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your system, then chances are you waited too long to launch. And in general, we still follow this process at Homejoy even today. If we want to experiment with a new tool or a new feature, we will often prototype it first without changing the site at all, by just running it out of spreadsheets. And this sounds crazy, because considering that we're a technology company, but it really enables us to try out a lot of different things and find out ahead of time where it will break. So once you have an initial very rough system, you should just try and keep growing it until you have trouble scaling it. So, the second, major mistake I see a lot of first-time entrepreneurs make is worry a lot up front about how they're going to do things, a year down the road. And building a startup is a process of self-discovery. You don't really know in advance how you're going to do things years down the road. So this is version 2 of the Homejoy phone system. It is a whole bunch of cell phones that actually Aaron, our co-founder in the background, was all answering himself. And we pushed the system pretty much as far as it would go until it became apparent that giving out Aaron's cell phone number was not the way of doing things. And only then did we actually invest in technology. So as part of this, as you're sort of building and scaling these systems, you might ask, like, well, so how do you grow your business? And unfortunately, there's no magic formula here. I think it would be malpractice for me to describe in detail, like, some sort of prescription, because every business is different. The one thing I do advise is to try and stress your operating model as early as you can. One initial objection to Homejoy was, that perhaps only in Silicon Valley would people actually care about booking a house cleaning online. And a lot of people ask, well, will Middle America even like this? And we answered that question just by launching in Middle America. So in our first 12 months, we launched in over 20 markets. And we saw a lot of success there, and that was able to tell us a lot more about how our model would scale. The good news here is that by being in the services industry, you have revenue. This gives you a lot more options than a traditional consumer internet play. And in general, while your product should be very focused as a startup, and you should only be probably testing one product at a time, I encourage you to take very much a spread-shot approach when it comes to growth and try as many different growth user acquisition tactics as possible, because you don't know what will work in advance. All right. So now that you're growing your business, you have these part software, part manual systems that are bursting at the seams. You need to have really good metrics so you know exactly where your model is breaking and where it's not. So metrics are very important for any startup. And it's always important to not get caught up in vanity metrics, in just total amount of user activity on your site or total amount of new signups. It's very important, especially when you're doing a very operationally focused business, to know where exactly your model is breaking. And in particular, what is preventing you from growing more as much next month as you did this month. And if you stay laser focused on that question and you try and measure everything that happens in your entire company, you'll be able to have a lot of good data there. So now you're at the point where you've actually, you're in a bunch of markets, you're trying to build out systems, and you actually need to invest in technology. And really, you should treat this not as building one core product. You're really building a whole suite of internal tools to help your internal operations team scale. So it's often said that these marketplace startups have two groups of customers. You have the customers who are buying the product, and you have the suppliers. I actually think of it as three groups. You have the customers, you have the suppliers, and then you have your internal admin team. And it's very important to spend a lot of time listening to each of those folks so you know exactly what they need to build. And it's very important to realize that you'll often be pulled in a bunch of different directions, building stuff for customers one month and for admins the next. But as long as you're focused on your top-line growth metrics, you'll get there. The one thing is that it's important to build a strong technical culture early. It is easy, given everything I've just said, to fall into the trap of thinking you don't need a strong tech team and an engineering team to actually build a business like this. And this will actually work pretty well for the first 6 months. And then what you'll find is that once you reach a certain scale, you actually can't bring your cost model in line with what you've projected, and you've effectively built another brick-and-mortar business that you were trying to disrupt. So you have to set a strong technical culture early, even as you are being very lean with what tech you build. So that's the model. It's actually relatively simple. And the beauty of it is that you can get started right now. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need years of experience in a particular industry. And you should really think of it as the entire company is the entire economy is your oyster. There are so many opportunities for service startups across all sorts of different industries that you'd be remiss not to try it if you're at all thinking about it. So that's it. If you're thinking about doing a services startup, I'd love to get in touch. My email is mark@homejoy.com. Feel free to reach out. Questions? Yeah?
Can you talk a little bit about how you use AI or machine learning in Homejoy without revealing any of your secret code?
Sure. Yeah, so my background does a lot of machine learning. And without revealing too much about Homejoy, it wasn't really a focus early on, but looking at the right metrics is extremely important, and discerning patterns, especially when it comes to reliability of your suppliers, is very important. So we do a lot of interesting data analysis to answer key business questions, like how do we ensure that cleaning professionals get the jobs on time, who are our highest value customers, and we build a lot of models internally, even if you don't necessarily see them on the site that fit that.
Unfortunately, when you're not a VC,
Other questions?
I thought coaching know what they
No?
do. I have made
Yep.
my storage system.
What would you consider some of the low-hanging fruit?
it's only one. It's one blade.
Other opportunities for innovation in technology?
Right. So that's a great question. The way Homejoy discovered cleaning is they actually tried like a whole bunch of different services. Originally, Homejoy was started as a way to book a life coach. Turns out not that many people want a life coach. So it wasn't like, the best idea. But actually, the co-founder of the company and our VP of growth, Aaron Chung, has an incredibly messy apartment. And when he and his sister were working in it, trying to get work done on a totally different idea, Adora was eventually fed up and said, hey, we have to get a cleaner here. And they actually discovered that the process of getting a cleaner was quite difficult, and the cleanings were all very expensive. And so I would look for inspiration in your daily life. Like, I would look for a service that you yourself use, because if it's a niche service, chances are it won't be enough, a large enough of an opportunity. Last question, yeah.
So now you're established in the space, there may be other opportunities you might want to move into delivering home cooking meals. You've already got customers that might want something like that. How do you evaluate those decisions, those choices?
Sure. So we do think that cleaning is just the beginning. It's cleaning is ubiquitous. Everyone needs it. Everyone needs it on a recurring basis. That makes it a great first step. Just like for Amazon in the 90s, books were a great first step because inventory was very important, and you didn't need to hold the book in your hand to be able to buy it. So it was a great first step for e-commerce. Similarly, I think cleaning is a great first step for a general home services company. We certainly have a lot planned along those lines, but you'll have to stay tuned. Cool. All right, thanks, folks.